All right. Well, it's 3:30 here in New York, so I guess we'll go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Becky Kamowitz. I'm the Executive Director of the Skin Cancer Foundation, and I'm here with Dr. Stephen Wang, who's the Chair of the Skin Cancer Foundation's Photobiology Committee. Thank you all for taking the time to be here with us today in the second of our fall 2025 webinar series around sun protection and our Seal of Recommendation program. So Dr. Wang is going to discuss some of the research he's conducted about ways to improve sunscreen compliance. And then he'll talk a little bit about our Seal of Recommendation and some of the recent changes we made to the criteria and design. So a few housekeeping notes before we get started, just so everyone knows, this is being recorded and we will send out that recording in the next couple of days to anyone who registered for the webinar. You all have been muted, but don't let that stop you from participating. If you have any questions along the way, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen and we'll answer as many questions as we can get to before the end of our time together today. Also, by registering for this event, you have been signed up for our monthly e-newsletter. We hope you find it really helpful. It's got all kinds of great information around skin cancer prevention, early detection, treatment, all kinds of great content that you can share on your own social media channels and help us raise more awareness around skin cancer. So with that out of the way, I'm honored to introduce Dr. Stephen Wang. As I said, he is the chair of the Skin Cancer Foundation's Photobiology Committee, has served on the committee for 18 years. And Dr. Wang is also the director of dermatologic oncology and the chief of dermatology at Hoag Memorial Hospital Presbyterian in Irvine, California. Dr. Wang, thanks so much for being here with us today.
Well, Becky, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so with that, I'm just going to hand the reins over to you for the presentation, and I'll be back at the end to help facilitate any questions we receive.
All right. Let me see if I can get it going. Hopefully this is working. Becky, can you see the slides?
Yes, I can. You're good.
All right. So first of all, thank you very much, everyone, for taking the time to join this conference. I have very simple three messages. One is talking about the current challenges associated with photo protection, specifically with sunscreen use. And second, talk about what I've been really interested in the last few years about compliance, what I call the final frontier. And lastly, highlight some of the very exciting new development that we are doing at the Skin Cancer Foundation, and specifically raising the standard for the CO recommendations. Now, let me see if I can advance this. All right, great. So one of the interesting things, as we know, is that sunscreen, when used correctly, it can really prevent skin cancer as well as photoaging. And this is one of the fundamental scientific truth that has been proven with numerous studies. And yet, and despite all of that, one of the surprising fact is we see that no one, at least in the US, the usage level, the adoption rate of sunscreen is still very limited. We have sort of looked over past few decades of sunscreen use, and you can consistently see that people in America, that only 30 to 40% of the people use sunscreen. And then less than 40% of the folks, less 40% of American households actually buy sunscreen. So that number around 40% doesn't really budge much over the last 2-3 decades, regardless the overwhelming and year-over-year public education, public safety message. Now, there are obviously a few challenges associated with this. You can sort of bucket them into 4 different categories. So first is what I call a societal influence. And for the longest time, and there's still this belief that tan skin is sexy and that it connotes a sense of wealthy and health, even though that has been proven that when you have a tan, it actually causes a damage to your skin. And there's also this physiological factor. Whenever you get a sun exposure, whenever you get a tan, the body basically sends out this what I call SOS message and telling the skin that, hey, we got DNA damage in the skin cells and let's produce more melanin. So, and in that production of melanin and as a way to shield and protect further UV damage, the body also releases what's called endorphin. That endorphin is a sign of side message side production of the body's neurological stimuli, and that endorphin, that's what triggers and makes people feel good about sun exposure. And lastly, when people talking about sunscreen, and the issue here is it's inadequate and people only use half of the desired amount. So the actual SPF is about half what's labeled as SPF. So if you bought a product that has SPF 50, you're really getting SPF 20 to 25. And also when people using sunscreen, they actually want to stay out of the sun much longer. And as a result, they're getting even more increase of usage, more exposure to the sun. And lastly, this is actually really a challenging issue about confusing messages. And this is actually made a lot worse with social media. In the past, there's always this kind of a gatekeeper, and there's a balanced view in any of the news coverage. But today, anyone with large followers and they can actually go on and start talking about facts that's maybe scientifically unproven. And there's this kind of propagation and the cycle keep feed off into each other. And one of the things also there's a challenge has to do with the FDA. In fact, if you know that in the US, we only about have 16 UV filters, and now there's some discussion about limiting the number of filters we have. And we have not had any new UV filters for the last 20 years. And hopefully this can be changed in 2026 when there's possibly a new UV filter called a BEMT that's going to come onto the market. So it's very exciting. But also, there's two studies called the mass absorption trials. So basically, the FDA conducted two studies. They put sunscreen on the volunteers. They put on 2 milligram per centimeter square, covers 75% of the body surface area. They did it 4 times a day for a period of 4 days. And then they basically measure the blood level to see if any of their UV filter actually gets into the bloodstream. And in fact, they find a few of those actually do get into the bloodstream. So those issues have caused a lot of the challenges. All right. Now, so as I was mentioning before, all of those challenges and creates this my own belief that is the health-based, meaning that if you use sunscreen, you will prevent skin cancer, and beauty-based, meaning if you use sunscreen, to actually prevent photoaging. And that hasn't really motivated people. And I like to say that knowledge and motivation does not translate to actual behavior. And how do we gonna overcome this compliance issue? How are we gonna change this behavior issues? So we actually took a lot of hint on this idea of, we as individuals cannot rely on willpower discipline to change your behavior. You have to build small ritualistic habits and changing physical environment or switching the reward system. And you sort of line up those easy small habits and to achieve the win. And there's a lot of those studies is actually published and from uh, BJ Fox, who is a Stanford professor, and he talked about some things very interesting. He talked about, hey, if you don't want to floss your teeth, that's all right. Just floss one tooth every night, all right? Just start out by just flossing one tooth, no more than that. And pretty soon you may be like feeling like, all right, like I'm just gonna move over to the next tooth, next tooth. So pretty soon you build a habit of sort of flossing all the entire teeth. He also talked about some other crazy kind of routine to build muscles. And every time he goes to the bathroom, he gets down to do 2 push-ups. And that's his way of sort of building up and getting him over this disinclination of doing push-ups. So those are the things. So, right. So what we did was we actually did 2 studies that basically took this idea of building habits and tried to sort of see if you can increase the usage of sunscreen. And so one of the things we did was we took this idea of Jerry Seinfeld, and people asked him, how do you come up with all these great jokes? And his routine is he goes, regardless what happened, regardless what I'm doing, where I am, I always try to sit down and write one joke. And when he finished writing the joke, he basically crossed off on the calendar. And so pretty soon you see like a row of crosses across all the calendars. So the idea here is you don't want to break that chain, all right? So that give you a visual cue. It says don't break that chain. So we kind of did the same thing. We took a sunscreen and we have 30 subjects on the control arm, 30 subjects on the experimental arm. They're all female of certain age. And we did this in the winter time. We gave them one group of folks and said, yeah, use the sunscreen, tell us if you like it, and come back 6 weeks later. The second group, we tell them there, here's the little sunscreen calendar, put it right there. And every time you put it on, just put it like X over it. So the idea is don't break the chain. So this is one of the calendars from one of the subject in the experimental group. And this is a relatively simple procedure, and but the subjects did not really know why we're doing it. All they want to know, all they knew was we want them to evaluate sunscreen. So after 6 weeks, we brought the two groups back and we measured the sunscreen. It turns out the group that had a calendar that had a 14% increase in usage of sunscreen over a 6 week period. And that translates to almost 121% increase. So it's almost double the amount of sunscreen use. Now, that itself is a evidence in talking about if you somehow put some sort of signal, visual cue, get people to do things, you can change their behavior. And studies have shown that it takes about 60 days to actually change someone's behaviors, in essence. So if you carry that experiment a little bit longer, theoretically, you can improve more sunscreen adoption. But that's still a little bit too complicated because you still have to check off things. So here's another study we did. Same study concept. We tell a group of 30 women to say, hey, go home and use the sunscreen. Tell us if you like it. And the other group, the experimental group, would give them a box and say, hey, put the sunscreen right next to your toothpaste. And so that's it. That's all we said. And that simple maneuver alone basically demonstrated a 20% increase of sunscreen use over a 6 week period. So that was pretty significant because that translates to almost 173% increasing adoptions, increasing usage. So this is like a very, very simple behavior change, changing the environment, changing the placement, and connecting one sort of hygienic habit with another habit. And that combination actually bumped the sunscreen use. Now, gonna shift gears, talk about the third and last topic, the Photobiology Committee, which is dear in my heart. I've been involved with this for almost 18 years now. And we are talking about the new standard seals recommendation that was just launched and in summer of this year. Now, a little bit backstory. The Skin Cancer Foundation was obviously founded by Dr. Perry Robbins. Dr. Madhu Pathak was actually very actively involved in the photobiology committee. Back then, the sunscreen on the market that has SPF 3, 4, 2 didn't really do much protection. And Dr. Madhu Pathak was the one who actually initiated the process and mandated that any sunscreen that will get the Skin Cancer Foundation seal approval must have SPF 15. So he was instrumental in sort of setting up the minimum SPF value. And obviously, we have other giants in this field, Dr. Henry Lim, who has been AD president, really a giant. And I've done many collaboration research with them, published paper on photo protection, sunscreen, etc. Now, as I mentioned before, it's got a long history. Since the 1980s, every few years, the Photobiology Committee has came up with new innovation in razor standards. In 1981, the committee actually came up with this protective seal for various protective products. And then in 1995, developed the safety and protection criteria for this on eyeglasses. In 2005, we came up with UPF protection standard for clothing. And 2011, we sort of divided the seal between active and daily. And this come to 2025, this new standard. Now, before I jump in there, one last comment. Our committee is comprised of 6 individuals, and we have Dr. Busney's from Brigham Young in Massachusetts, Dr. Annie Chan and Dr. Richards are from Johns Hopkins, and Dr. Nelson's from Mayos, and Dr. Yu is from New York and Mount Sinai. Now, let me just walk you through some of the key differences about this new seal of recommendation. First, um, we actually increase the SPF value for daily use product. So now a product sunscreen for daily use before was SPF 15, the minimum criteria. Now we bumped up from SPF 15 to SPF 30. And also we have increased the critical wavelength from 370 to 373. So again, for those of you who don't know, critical wavelength is what FDA required studied measurement. All sunscreen have to achieve a measurement of critical wavelength above 370, and otherwise they will not be classified as broad spectrum sunscreen. Now, next, for the active use product, that is people who are going out to the beaches, running, spending time playing outdoor sports, um, that active product, active categories of sunscreen, we bumped up SPF from 30 to 50, and also require maintaining the water resistance at least 40 to 80 minutes. And we also increased the critical wavelength from 370 to 373. Now, of course, that what sets the CO apart, in addition to this higher standard, is every sunscreen product also requires the HRPT testing and phototox requirement. And those have not changed in our new CO of criteria recommendations. Now, one key caveat. For those of you who think, it's not a big deal, you just move from 370 to 373 nanometers, so it's like a 3 nanometer differences. But in reality, that's actually a fairly big movement, because when you move that criteria over a little bit, you increase the absorption profile of the entire sunscreen. So you can see this is absorption of two sunscreen that both has SPF 50. The blue one had a critical wavelength 370, and the green one had a critical wavelength of 373. So you're getting all those extra layer protections. And so that is another evidence in demonstrating that by increasing the shifting the critical wavelength from 370 to 373, you are enhancing the UVA protection, you're enhancing the overall UV protection of that sunscreen product. All right, so keep going. Now shifting gears, talking about UPF, that's clothing. And again, we raised the standard, raised the UPF from 30 to 50 for both clothing, hats, accessory, and shade. And I think there's no major changes for the window shade and films at this point. Now, again, this is a new design of the CO recommendations, and you can see that there's quite a number of different COs, but there are daily use, active use, and that's designed for sunscreen. We have fabric, we have hat, we have outdoor shade, we have window films, window tint, laminated glass, and lens. So those are all the differences of the COs that a product, a company can apply for. And with that, I'm going to end, and hopefully I can answer some questions anyone have. I'm going to stop sharing and let Becky for you to take over.
Sure. Thank you for that, Dr. Wang, for going through all the changes to our seal recommendation program and giving us a look at some of the research you've done. I noticed you were talking about the study you did. I think it was the toothpaste one, was with women. And I wondered if you have any thoughts about men when it comes to sunscreen and compliance.
Yeah, this is a relatively difficult group, I would say. And again, when we talk about men, we should really sort of subdivide them between the different age groups. And a lot of elder men over the age of 65, 70, it's actually really difficult category demographics. And because first of all, they don't have the habit of even using moisturizers. And so they just don't believe in putting lotions and cream on. And that's a very, very difficult group. But then if you go on to the other end of the spectrum, that, the younger men in their 20s and 30s, and they are much more educated, and they actually understand the risk. And there's also this kind of acceptance for men to actually put on moisturizers. And so that demographic is actually a little bit better. We have not tried to do any study with the men because they have just a very low sort of usage level, and we want to basically sort of see, can you make some sort of a change, and that's why we want to control. We did the control for women only because it was easier to compare.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I've worked for the Skin Cancer Foundation for over a dozen years, and my husband just started wearing a moisturizer, a daily moisturizer this year when he turned 40. So it takes time, even with education and an advocate in the house.
Yeah. I think it's quite funny that when the woman, like a married couple, comes to my office, I only focused on skin cancer. I don't do anything else. So when the married couple comes to my office, and the wife always turns to me and says, Go remind them, tell them about using sunscreen." And I turn around and look at her, and it's like, "How long you guys been married?" They're like 40 years. What chance do I have for this guy to even listen to me?
I know, but we keep trying.
Yeah. It's a very difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so we have a couple of questions in the Q&A. I'll remind everyone that it's open for you. So the first one we have here, does the Skin Cancer Foundation allow use of the new in vitro double plat ISO method to be used as static SPF substantiation? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, whoever's asking this question is obviously well versed and actually is really knowledgeable. So I don't think we are at this point. We're basically still. Can you ask the question again? I can't see the questions. Let me see if
Oh,
I can
sure.
see the question.
I don't know if you can open up the Q&A at the
Okay, I
bottom.
see it. I see
Yeah.
it. Yeah, we are not using any in vitro methodology at this point, and we're only using in vivo testing on live human subject at this moment.
And I'm sure if we are making any changes, we'll be sure to let any of our corporate council members who take advantage of the Seal of Recommendation program know. Will the recent media attention of sunscreen testing in Australia have an impact on Seal of Recommendation requirements?
Yeah, it's so the short answer is no at this point.
Mhm.
We have not changed it or a CO recommendation requirement. And this is something that we are actively monitoring, actively sort of talking to the some of the experts in the industry. And for those who may not know, aware of this, and what happened in Australia was there was majority of the sunscreen that was produced by one lab, and for some reason that lab's the vehicle, the lotions, it is actually now working well. And so their production quality and making that sunscreen was actually cannot meet the standard. But to compound the factor is there was, I would say, bad testing labs, and they actually did not pick up the low SPF value, and they actually just approved it. And that their testing methodology was perhaps flawed. And um, and I think this we have seen this kind of issues, the discrepancies, the differences in the testing, not only in Australia, but we've seen it in Europe. We've seen it perhaps a few times in the Consumer Reports, a few times brought that to the attention. But I think the issue here really is the testing of SPF is not as straightforward as people tend to believe, number one. And hopefully we have not seen this kind of issues in the US at this point. So as a result, at this moment, the committee is not really sort of changing any of the requirement, but we are actively monitoring it.
I'll just take a moment here to because I don't think I've acknowledged this yet in this webinar, and I'll probably do it in all of the ones in our series. But that Dr. Wang and all of his fellow committee members, they all volunteer their time with the Skin Cancer Foundation, and we're just so grateful to them, and that they are actively looking at these issues as we become aware of them, and looking at the latest research and making sure that we do everything we can to make the Seal of Recommendation program the most valuable it can be for consumers, right? We want to do everything we can to make sure everyone has access to the most effective sun protection. So, thank you again, Dr. Wong, for all of your time there.
I'd like to just add, Becky, I think um, when we look at there's one way to think about this. That is, there's a set of tests that's required for a sunscreen to be marketed, approved to be sold in the US. And that standard, that test is set and regulated by FDA as a drug, basically. And in a way that we can't really alter the testing methodology too much because this is set by the FDA in a sense. But what we did was we actually elevated the standard. That's the difference. Because you can sell any kind of sunscreen as long as it's above SPF 15. But we said, no, this is just not enough. And we understand that. And the data has shown it. And that's why we elevated the daily use from 15 to 30, the active use from 30 to 50. That's number one. Number two is of all the study, we've shown that critical oil 370 may not be as good. So that's why we raised it to 373. And that standard is that's a major improvement. And I like to use the analogy that when you go to, let's say, go to college, you have to take entry exam, SAT. And if you get a 500 and you can get into this school. But we say, wait, that's not good enough, right? We needed to get you to a 600 or 700. So by increasing the standard, increasing the passing criteria, that's how the seal proves its value. And not to mention, you can sell a product in the market without the need of doing phototox study. But we actually require a company that getting that seal and do additional phototox study. So this is almost like saying that, again, using the analogy that when you go for a college entry competitions and selection, all you have to do is take the SAT. We say, no, it's not enough. You have to take the ACT as well. You need both, right? So that's a one way of sort of hopefully to explain it to everyone what's the difference and why the criteria we set is much more stringent. It's perhaps the most stringent one in the marketplace at this point.
Well said. And I think that, also just ending on just highlighting one of the other points that you made around the seal of recommendation program and the different categories for sun protective products and the redesign and how important it is really, at the Skin Cancer Foundation, we've really always said that sunscreen is just such an important component of a daily sun protection strategy. But of course, it's just one piece of it, along with covering up with clothing, hats, sunglasses, seeking shade. And I think what's great about this program and what we've done to update it is really making sure that everyone is aware of that and understands all of the sun protection strategies that are available. So if anyone is looking for more information around this program, I suggest you check our website, skincancer.org/seal, and you can find more information there. And of course, we're always here to answer any questions that you may have. So with that, I think I'll close things out for today. Thanks again, Dr. Wang, for taking some time out of your busy day. And thank you all for joining us today. We're grateful you could be here with us, and we'll have more information to share soon. Take care.
Goodbye.
Bye.